Before we step into tonight's story, don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the stories that make you feel a little more alive. Your support keeps this space going, and who knows? Maybe the next story will feel like it was written just for you. The house had never felt that loud before. Even when Danny was a toddler, even when he was a moody teenager blasting music behind a closed bedroom door, even when his soccer team had piled into the living room after a muddy win. None of it compared to the energy that filled these walls tonight. Balloons drifted lazily across the ceiling, some tangled in the corners like tired party guests who refused to leave. The scent of vanilla frosting and spilled soda lingered in the air. Plastic cups stood abandoned on every flat surface, half-melted ice clinking softly as if whispering secrets about the night. The bass from earlier still seemed to hum faintly in the floorboards, a ghost of laughter and youth that refused to fade. Danny had turned 21. 21. The number still felt foreign in my mind. I could remember his first birthday cake, his chubby fingers digging into frosting, his delighted squeals when the candle flickered. And now here we were, beer bottles in the recycling bin, friends spilling out into the driveway, engines roaring as they disappeared into the quiet suburban night. The house exhaled when the last car pulled away. I stood at the kitchen sink, sleeves rolled up, rinsing wine glasses under warm water. The rhythm was soothing. Rinse, dry, stack. The kind of mindless motion that allowed thoughts to wander freely. That's when I heard the soft knock. Not on the front door. On the door frame behind me. I turned, expecting Danny. Maybe he'd forgotten his phone. Maybe he needed help carrying something upstairs. But it wasn't Danny. It was Tyler. "Hey, Mrs. Garrett," he said, hands tucked awkwardly into the pockets of his jacket. His voice was softer now that the music had stopped. More grounded. "I just wanted to say thank you. Tonight was really great." I smiled despite the ache in my feet. "You can drop the misses, Tyler. After all these years? It's Helen." He laughed lightly and stepped into the kitchen. Under the overhead light, I saw him clearly for the first time that night. When had he grown into this? He was no longer the lanky teenage boy who raided my fridge after soccer practice, who argued passionately about video games at the dining table. His shoulders were broad now. His jaw carried the faintest shadow of stubble. His posture had shifted, more certain, more intentional. "Thanks, Helen," he said slowly, testing the name as if it held weight. "Can I help you clean up?" "You don't need to," I replied automatically. "I want to," he said gently, already picking up plates from the coffee table. "Danny and the others left in a rush. Figured you could use a hand." I hesitated. It was late. Past 1 in the morning. Most of his friends would be halfway home by now. But there was something earnest in his expression. Something that felt less like obligation and more like choice. "All right," I said. "But you're not leaving without a slice of cake." He smiled. "Deal." We worked side by side in easy silence at first. The clink of dishes and the hum of the refrigerator filled the space between us. It wasn't uncomfortable. In fact, it felt strangely natural, like we had done this 100 times before. "You always throw the best parties," he said eventually, rinsing a dish before handing it to me. I chuckled. "That's just good lighting and a lot of sugar." "No," he said, shaking his head. "It's more than that. Even back in high school, your house felt safe." The word lingered. Safe. It hit deeper than I expected. "Thank you," I said softly. "I tried to make it that way." He leaned against the counter, drying his hands. "I used to think it was just because of the food and the games. But it wasn't. You let us be ourselves. You didn't treat us like kids who needed to be controlled. You listened." I glanced at him, unsure where this was going. "You saw us," he added. The air shifted. There was something in his tone, not playful, not casual. Something sincere. "Waited. It's rare," he continued, "to feel seen. Especially by someone older. Someone who doesn't have to care." I swallowed. Compliments about my cooking? Easy. Compliments about hosting? Comfortable. But this felt different. "I always thought you boys were more interesting than most adults," I joked, trying to lighten the mood. But Tyler didn't laugh. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Have you ever wanted to go back? Not to being young exactly, but to that feeling of being noticed? Appreciated? The question caught me off guard. No one asked me things like that. Not my friends, who were busy comparing arthritis remedies and vacation packages. Not my ex-husband, who had drifted away long before we signed the papers. Not even Danny, who loved me but saw me primarily as mom. I set the dish towel down. I think everyone wants that, I admitted, to matter, especially when the house gets quiet. He nodded slowly, eyes steady on mine. I see you, Helen, he said quietly. Not just as Danny's mom, but you. And I always have. My breath stalled. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, warmer. I turned toward the fridge under the pretense of grabbing cake, needing a second to collect myself. My cheeks burned in a way I hadn't felt in years. Cake? I asked, voice softer than intended. He smiled, a slow, knowing smile that held no mockery. Only if you join me. We sat at the kitchen table, 2 plates between us. The refrigerator hummed. A balloon drifted down from the ceiling and brushed lightly against the cabinet before settling. The cake was sweet, but the conversation was sweeter. We talked about books he'd been reading, about movies I had watched alone on quiet Friday nights, about dreams that had once felt urgent but had slowly faded into practicality. He told me he admired how I carried myself, that I seemed grounded, warm without being naive, strong without being cold. It's rare, he said, to see someone who's been through things and still chooses softness. No one had described me that way before. The clock ticked past 2 in the morning. I don't know if this is inappropriate, he began carefully, gaze dropping to his plate before rising again. But I think you're beautiful. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full. Tyler. I whispered. I'm not trying to disrespect you, he said quickly. I've thought it for a long time. And tonight, sitting here like this, I couldn't leave without saying it. My fingers traced the rim of my wine glass. I expected to feel offended, or embarrassed, or defensive. Instead, I felt alive. I don't know what to say, I admitted. You don't have to say anything, he replied gently. I just needed you to know. For the first time, I looked at him not as the boy who used to borrow our lawn chairs for school events, but as a man brave enough to speak honestly, respectfully. Something shifted inside me. When he finally stood to leave, his hand brushed mine as he reached for his jacket. The touch was brief, accidental, but it felt electric. Good night, Helen. Good night, Tyler. The door closed softly behind him, and the silence that followed was different. It wasn't the lonely quiet I had grown used to, the kind that crept in after guests left, leaving only the dishwasher's hum and a half-empty glass of wine for company. This silence felt charged, warm. I stood there for a long moment, replaying everything in my mind. The way he had said my name, the steadiness in his voice, the certainty. I walked into the living room and caught my reflection in the mirror above the fireplace. My hair had slipped from its clip, falling in soft waves around my shoulders. My makeup had faded slightly, but my eyes seemed brighter somehow. The dress I wore, simple, understated, still hugged my frame gently. 57. That was my age. 57 wasn't supposed to feel like this. It was supposed to feel settled, predictable, safe in its routine. But tonight, I didn't feel invisible. I sank onto the couch, wine glass untouched in my hand. Why tonight? Tyler had always been kind, always respectful. But tonight there had been intention in his gaze. Not a boy seeking comfort. Not a child mistaking affection for something else. A man acknowledging a woman. The world would scoff. I knew that. The math alone would make people uncomfortable. But that wasn't what this felt like. It didn't feel scandalous. It felt human. Sleep didn't come easily. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the echo of his words looping in my mind. I see you. When was the last time someone had said that to me? Not I need you. Not I rely on you. Not can you help me? But I see you. Morning light eventually filtered through the curtains, soft and unforgiving. I expected to wake with regret or embarrassment. Instead, I felt curious. The next day passed in routine. Danny slept until noon, groaning about a headache. I made coffee, cleaned the last remnants of the party, returned the house to its orderly quiet. But underneath it all, something subtle had changed. 3 days later, my phone buzzed. A message from Tyler. "Thank you again for the cake. And for listening." My heart skipped before I could stop it. I stared at the message longer than necessary before replying. "You're welcome. I'm glad you stayed." The dots appeared almost instantly. I'm glad I did too. The conversation that followed was innocent. Harmless, even. Books. A documentary recommendation. A joke about Danny's terrible singing. But there was a thread running through it. An awareness. A new layer of attention. Over the next few weeks, our messages became more frequent. Not constant. Not obsessive. Just present. He asked about my day. He remembered small details. He told me about his classes, his uncertainty about the future, his quiet fears of not becoming enough. And I listened. Not as a mother figure, but as someone who understood what it meant to question your place in the world. One evening, he stopped by to return a book I had lent him years ago. We stood on the porch, the sun setting behind him. "I meant what I said," he told me softly. "I didn't ask which part." "I know," I replied. There was no rush. No reckless decision. Just two people standing at the edge of something undefined. "I don't want to complicate your life," he added. "You're not," I said truthfully, because the truth was, he wasn't complicating it. He was illuminating it. For years, my identity had narrowed. Wife, then ex-wife, mother, then mother of an adult. Somewhere in that transition, I had misplaced myself. Tyler hadn't created something new. He had simply reminded me of what was already there, that I was still capable of being seen, desired, valued beyond my roles. We didn't cross any lines. We didn't rush into declarations. But the space between us held possibility. And possibility at 57 felt like a miracle. One night, weeks later, as autumn settled in and the air grew crisp, he asked if I would join him for coffee. "Public place," he added quickly. "Just to talk." I smiled at the thoughtfulness. We met at a quiet cafe downtown. No one looked twice at us. We were just two people sharing a table by the window. Conversation flowed easily. At one point, he reached across the table. Not dramatically, not urgently, just enough for his fingers to brush mine. The touch was warm. Intentional this time. "I don't want to rush you," he said quietly. "Or pressure you. I care about you." The word care felt solid. Grounded. I searched his face for immaturity. For fleeting infatuation. I found none. Instead, I saw steadiness. "Tyler," I said gently, "this isn't simple." "I know. The world might not understand." "I'm not the world," he replied. I laughed softly at that. No, he wasn't. He was just himself. And I was just myself. Two people meeting at an unexpected intersection of timing and courage. When we left the cafe, we walked side by side down the sidewalk. Leaves crunched beneath our feet. At the corner, he paused. "May I?" he asked, barely above a whisper. It wasn't a demand. It was a question. I nodded. He leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to step back. Our kiss was soft, brief, not fueled by recklessness, but by recognition. When he pulled away, his forehead rested lightly against mine. "I see you," he murmured again. And this time, I believed it completely. Love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly. In a kitchen after a party. In a conversation over cake. In the courage to speak what has been felt for years. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe this is a chapter. Maybe it's a turning point. But I know this. At 57, I am not invisible. At 21, he is not naive. We are simply two souls who met in an unexpected moment and chose honesty over fear. And sometimes that's enough. If this story made you feel something, hope, curiosity, maybe even a little courage, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more stories about the moments that change us when we least expect it. Because connection doesn't ask for permission. It just arrives. Unexpected, unannounced, and deeply, undeniably real.